Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have another update for you from the brand Borealis. A little bit about them. They were founded back in 2013, and they're a micro brand with vintage aesthetics that really focus on updating classics of the past while taking advantage of today's modern manufacturing improvements. Now, this particular type of watch would be a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design language when you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically through some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their Bull Shark V2, and this is, in particular prototype is the white dial Snowflake hands model with the date window, and it's basically inspired by the first vintage big crown divers of the 1950s, applying the brand's signature combination of vintage styling and modern specs. Now, at the time of shooting this, it's still available for pre-order at $4.99. Basically, what you're going to do is put down a 50% deposit, so it's $249.50, and then these are estimated to ship in November, December of 2022 timeframe. So I'm excited to share this with you guys. I know the brand Borealis has kind of popped on and off of the channel, so very cool. It's been a little while since I've had one of these in hand. Definitely excited to share with you guys. I really dig the, just kind of off the top, I think the scale on this one is really, really nice, and some of the fine details are, I think, really kind of fun and surprising and very subtle. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with you all. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, guys, so first things first. Not only are we getting that vintage aesthetic, we're also getting vintage scale. So in terms of the sizing on this one, it is very compact. 38 millimeter diameter, 13 millimeters thick, 47 millimeters lug to lug, and it's made out of full 316L stainless steel. It has some nice brushing and high polish all over this bad boy in terms of some really great, I think, mixture of those different finishings. They come together really well, and one thing that it's hard to tell on this particular dial, but there's actually a really great kind of Grand Seiko-esque texturing done very subtly on this dial. So very cool to kind of have Swiss, Tudor-like snowflake hands, but then you're getting a very Japanese-like snowflake style dial. I thought that was a really cool combination. Especially in, such a well put together piece. I really dig, of course, vintage big crowns. Everybody loves those. But the nice thing is you're getting things like ceramic in terms of the insert. You're getting, more functional toothy coin edge there. And then, of course, everything in terms of fit and finish and quality is going to be a lot more modern and, something that could really take a beating versus, back at this time, of course, dive watches were very capable. But I think, you take this watch back to the 1950s, and people would think that this is the most solid watch ever built, just because that's how far we've come in terms of technology. Now, the bezel is 120 clicks, so let's hear that. Ooh, very notchy. I like to pretty much find the balance in terms of what I like for bezel action is somewhere in between notchy and smooth. This is definitely more on the notchy side, and it's not bad by any means. It's actually very precise, very little, if any, back play, and very tactile. For me, I prefer slightly kind of softer notchiness there on the clickiness of that action, just to give it a more kind of refined feel. But from a functional standpoint, the clickier kind of the better. So I think you won't be disappointed if you pick this thing up and you kind of get really fidgety with it. The crown is unguarded, of course, and signed, and you can see that nice case profile, very thin mid case, nice brushing. Let me give it a quick little wipe here. Nice little brushed and polished transitions, quite sharp on the case there. And of course, this is just a prototype, so the ones you guys would get delivered to you are going to be in you know, pristine new condition. Also drilled lugs, which is great, which is all, you know, it's one thing, it's period correct in terms of, you know, that functionality, and also it's something that's useful that I think in terms of aesthetics doesn't really take away anything. If anything, it adds a little point of interest there. Inside, you're getting the Miyota 9015, although you can't see it through this solid engraved case back here. And the nice thing is the case back does have a little bit of life to it there. It's not super standard, super flat. There's definitely, you know, some design that went into that there, which is a nice little extra touch. And then we get into this dial textured with applied indices. Let me try to see how close I can get this to the camera without just spoiling it. So there we go. And you guys can see that very faint texturing, which is really, really fantastic. Look at that. Catches light in different ways, plays with the light. Very, very cool. We'll keep it up here while I get through the rest of these specs. So BGW9 Swiss Superluminova, 300 meters water resistance, which is a very nice little surprise, especially when you think of something from this size and scale. Still being 300 meters water resistance is definitely a big win. They could have easily took it down to, like, you know, 100 or 200. Just because of the size. I still think they kept it fairly svelte and slim while having a very nice solid modern feel on the wrist because of you know, the additional you know, fortification when it comes to the case to make sure that it is in fact that water resistant. So the lugs here are 20 millimeter lugs. You get the female end link there. Everything is solid. Stainless steel bracelet. It has a slight taper from 20 down to 18 millimeters. Twin trigger flip lock clasp here, as you guys can see, with manual micro adjust holes. So a lot there. You know, that's much like the rest of the market, but then you do get a nice blend in terms of the aesthetic and then just the fine execution points of those details with the texturing there, which is, I think, pretty fantastic. They're quite lovely. Let me give it another quick wipe before I get it on wrist here. So very, very cool, guys, but let's go ahead, get the camera to focus, of course, and get this on wrist so you guys can see how it wears. Okay, guys, as you can see on my 7.25/7.5, somewhere in between there, inch wrist, it wears really, really nicely. And I'm surprised because normally a 38 millimeter diver might appear a little bit small on my wrist. I think this Borealis, what it's done successfully is that it's really balanced the proportions, right? So scale are one thing in terms of the sizing, but the proportions are also very important. So it does have a kind of a larger dial aperture there with a thinner bezel insert, but it doesn't seem out of balance or anything like that. The dial doesn't feel too expansive because they still do have, of course, the outer track that kind of pushes the indices closer to the center there. And then also you have the fully index track, which does kind of fill the space. And then you have that kind of toothy gear type of edge there on the bezel, which I think help kind of extend the visual weight out, which is nice. So very cool, something to always kind of be aware of with the way a watch is going to appear on your wrist versus just kind of how it's going to appear, in wristies and taking, when you get it close to the camera and there's some lens distortion or whatever, everything can look a bit oversized, and then you kind of get out here and then you want to just make sure it doesn't seem too undersized, especially for a sports watch like this. So I think it has really great proportions, very slim, nice and compact. You can see it lays across the wrist very nicely, nice and flat, with that slight little turn down curvature on those very classically styled lugs. And another nice thing is you can see, since it does have the drilled lugs, it means you can swap these out, pretty easily. So if you wanted to put it on a rubber Tropic style strap or put it on a nylon NATO style strap, definitely a lot of options there that will look great with this type of watch with that kind of more vintage aesthetic. So with that, let's actually check out some of the more modern features of this watch, which would be the lume, and then hopefully the low light transition will do a nice job of kind of highlighting all of the little details in terms of the lost for words, all of the textures of that dial. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, as you can see, this is a truly modern dive watch. Really bright there. That BGW9 is simply blasting away. I like that everything is fully indexed, so it's still completely usable, whether you're in the darkness of a room or just the darkness of the night, or even the darkness of the deeper depths of water. But one thing I really like to do is work in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. You'll often spend time indoors, right? Underneath overhangs, or, maybe the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it is nice to see what these watches, in terms of the color palettes and the textures of the finishing, will look like in less than optimal lighting, to include maybe some harsh lighting as seen here, very high contrast, that would typically kind of show, you can see, not really defects, but just kind of wear marks within the brushing there, but still quite uniform as the light glides over it. And you can see that the way that the light plays with the dial, it still stays very, very legible, which is nice. The brightness of that blue, keep things from getting washed out in terms of, visibility, which I think is great. And my goodness, look at just the little fine details that the light's able to capture. Look at that. At the little soft, subtle snowflake-like texture. Very, very cool. I love the three-dimensional nature of that. And yeah, it just adds something, right? A little something special, because this silhouette is definitely a very recognizable one, but I think you kind of mix it up, you kind of change the game a bit, and you can actually work in some very cool themes. And I do enjoy that textured dial, the kind of snowflake texture dial to go with the snowflake hands, which I think is just kind of cool. So we'll get the lights back on here, getting some closing thoughts, guys. On the wrist, like I mentioned, really great proportions, wears very slim and compact. In terms of model variants, definitely check for current availability in the links in the description. In terms of comparable models, guys, there's so many divers that are out there in that 500 range, and Borealis is always a very strong competitor. This is no different. So, in terms of quality and value, exactly what you would expect from Borealis. It's really just a question of if you're into this aesthetic. And if you do like the way that it looks, I'm sure you'll be completely pleased with the way that it's built and everything like that. If you've ever experienced or handled a Borealis timepiece, they're still really well put together. Nothing to, let's say, like some type of near luxury level, but in terms of a very nice and very strong contender for a lot of value, having complex finishing, having a very robust build quality that feels very, very solid and is very, very solid. There's definitely a lot to like from that perspective, guys. So bottom line, it's just another great blend of vintage and modern from the Borealis team. So really happy to share this one with you guys. Looking forward to the eventual, production models that will come out, and then hopefully we'll be able to revisit on the channel later on. So with that said, if you guys liked the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.